Yes, my name is Mark Cadwallader, and I live in Conroe, Texas, which is about an hour north of Houston. And I came to India for a hip replacement, actually preferably a hip resurfacing operation on my left hip, and ended up with a nicely resurfaced hip. It's been about 10 or 11 days since the actual date of the operation, and I've had a good stay in the hospital at the Chennai Apollo, and then at the beachside resort following that. Yeah, the problem with the U.S. surgery, I came very close to getting a sort of a big ball hip replacement in the United States, but when I finally pinned them down on the total charges from the hospital, it was just way too much and more than I had insurance coverages for. I would have had to pay out of pocket $45,000 to $50,000 in a total bill that would have been closer to $60,000. And in the program here, the very nice program that I partook of here in Chennai, it was, I think, the hospital charges with the hip and doctor's fees and everything about $7,000. And in the U.S., as I said, it would have been for me about altogether about $55,000 to $60,000. Dollars was quite a difference. And then you have to add my wife came along for the trip, which was a very nice benefit, and stayed in the room with me. And even with her coming along, our total travel expenses on top of the hospital fee probably came to around $11,000 altogether. And it was interesting because when I found the charges there from the hospital in the U.S., I began to do some research on the internet, and I did a search in Google for medical tourism, and World Med Assist was one of the first ones that came up, and I began to look at it and called and talked to Wouter Hoberechts, and he was very helpful and very informative. And one thing led to another as I began to look at things and talk to them more. That just worked out very well. They arranged all the travel and took care of the initial communications with the doctors here to expedite the x-rays and get me going with the resurfaced hip. And then the Apollo Chennai, of course, was a easy choice. All the credentials and qualifications of Dr. Bose, which were highlighted on some of the videos, and I could actually see him do the surgery and be interviewed with questions. He seemed to know quite a lot about hip resurfacing, and as I looked into it, that's what I decided I wanted. I initially had thought about the hip resurfacing as the preferred way, and got sidetracked because in the U.S. they still emphasize the total hip replacement with the various kinds of joints and the big ball technology, and I thought, well, maybe that was equivalent. But then looking into it further, I liked what Dr. Bose had to say in the interview about hip resurfacing and further looking into the hip resurfacing. But the Chennai was very well priced and had very good credentials and testimonies about Dr. Bose's previous work. The fact that he'd done so many, had so much experience was a big factor for me.